Um, so I will start by saying thank you for having me today and for inviting me. I thought I'd sort of briefly mention two of my projects and then do a deeper dive into a series called Our Sign Painter, which is based on popular nicknames for cities in India. The act of transcription has been a key driver in my practice. A project that was seeded when I was a student at the Architectural Association in London was the making of folk art inspired transcriptions of canonical drawings. And for me, the drawing Domino House by Corbusier stayed with me several years after leaving the school. And every time I visited home, I started to see lots of new structures, not necessarily built by architects, but inadvertently applying this principle of column and grid construction. And I wanted to celebrate this sort of form of self-built architectless homes. And to do so, I handed over the drawing to a festival icon lights fabricator. And these are sort of icon lights that pop up on streets during sort of, religious festivals, political sort of campaigns, and they're often sort of 2 to 3 stories high. And it got me thinking, who makes them, and how do they sort of appear and disappear in sort of record time? And they're mounted on these casuarina scaffolds that also sort of go up and down very quickly. And I think sort of the act of finding the maker and sort of also dealing with my own sort of understanding of like, why is the perspective not right? Do I need to give him a quick lesson in perspective drawing versus letting him sort of work through it in his own way, which was to have a gridded floor and then sort of transcribe the drawing in sections. But of course, there are 4 steps rather than 17 like on one flight. So I had to sort of live with sort of what was happening through the medium of LED lights and the scale that I was working at as well. My recent body of paintings feature cropped facades of in perspectival skews using canvas shaped relief panels and the exhibition wall. They draw on colorful architecture in South India, as well as echoes in Western hard edge abstract painting, as well as Memphis design. And I think that little known connection between the founder of Memphis, Ettore Sotsas, his travels in India, and very close documentation of similar houses isn't sort of given as much coverage when it comes to conversations around postmodern design. And so sort of overall, I think I oscillate between comparison and a desire for self-sufficiency. And I think this is kind of what drives my practice, where I observe global movements and its collision with the familiar and the everyday. A friend once said, Indians don't invent, we only reverse engineer, which got me thinking, well, perhaps reverse engineering of an established trope can reveal its workings and its complexities. So now I consciously identify metaphors between my everyday landscape and art history and architectural theory to make transcriptions. So now moving closer to like identity and where I'm from, Chennai is the name of the city I'm from. It's known as the Detroit of Asia, a nickname that might conjure a sense of pride in its association with America, the aspirational developed West. Chennai is home to Ford, Hyundai, Renault, Nissan, and loads of car manufacturing units. And in fact, lots of new cars I've seen on London's roads, I've actually seen years ago in Chennai because that's where they were made and shipped from. And this is because India opened up its economy to foreign investment in 1991, which meant that global companies could then set up hubs in India. So my relatively protected experience of like going to school in a car also meant finding shortcuts to newly laid IT highways over Buckingham Canal in Chennai. And this was dug by the British to transport goods during colonial rule. And it is today an exposed sewer for the city's service workers. So the idea of progress and development on economic terms is firmly rooted in an index set up by the world's industrialized economies. So countries not on the industrialized list are caught in a cycle of catching up development, which got me thinking, is calling Chennai the Detroit of India a badge of progress or derision? The irony is that Detroit's automobile-fueled heyday is long gone, and it is now a post-industrialized city in urban decline. Yes, some regeneration, but still, this is a detail that many Chennai residents, I think, might be unaware of. So I'm not insinuating that Chennai and Detroit's fates are tied, although Ford recently chose to close its hub in Chennai and move elsewhere because it's cheaper. I'm not, but I am simply highlighting a cultural, geographical, and temporal dissonance in the pairing. What gets swept under the carpet in this form of generalized nomenclature? Who issues these nicknames? When are they coined? And why do we resort to them as markers of identity? The basis of comparison might be a genuine shared history between places, like textile manufacture in Coimbatore and Manchester. With twin or sister cities, there might be a mutually beneficial agreement. In most cases, though, the naming can be traced back to seats of power. For example, it was Lord Curzon who called Alleppey, which is the anglicized name for Alapula, the Venice of the East. Harking to a Eurocentric worldview, this comparison does not allow for an equal footing of values. So in the phrasing of nicknames, the major is firmly established in a hierarchy of relations. And these geoverbal yardsticks, I like to call them, are post-colonial minefields calling to be unpacked through artwork. My series, Our Sign Painter, comprises of aluminum metal signs and screen prints. The series title is quoted from V.S. Naipaul's novel, A House for Mr. Biswas, an amazing book, which I highly recommend, in which the protagonist develops a skill for expressive lettering. I borrow the graphic and material language of wayfinding infrastructure, including street, water bus, and road signs, and present them as miniature dioramas. In this instance, rather than hand painting the signage myself, my agency is expressed as an assimilation of established sign and printing conventions. I mimic the characteristics of signage using image-based font search tools, Adobe Illustrator and Photoshop, which I then send to the printer for fabrication. So signs are often read as fact, and the making of my own signs offers a site of fantasy. For the wording on the signs, I work from a list of popular nicknames for Indian cities and tourist destinations, and I apply the literary device of inversion to rejig the normative positioning of places on the world hierarchy. So the first listening back of the inverted phrase often sounds weird and wrong. Why does it sound strange to say it out loud? This is possibly because the chevrons of progress from major to minor, west to east, north to south, is so deeply entrenched in my consciousness. So although I would like to start from a globalized state of culture, as described by Nicolas Bourriaud's Altermodernism, a colonial hangover continues to skew my perceptions of place. Post-colonial considerations on translation are therefore pertinent to this discussion, as no act of translation takes place in an entirely neutral space of absolute equality. So visualized here is an image of Gandikota, which is known as the Grand Canyon of India, which I would love to visit. A key reference for me through this project is Palestinian artist Emily Jassir's censored Venice Biennale intervention, Stazione 2009. She proposed Arabic translations along Italian Vaporetto signs to remark on historic and potential future ties between Venice and the Arab world. However, it proved too contentious, and the city council canceled it at the last minute. This is testament to the fraught nature of translation, both as translator and reader. As a development, my hand-pulled screen prints employ a perspectival skew to convey a sense of skewed perception. The oblique angle also draws on the Dutch angle shot in cinematography, which is used to convey a sense of uneasiness and disorientation. This echoes the traveler's subjective experience of viewing signs from a moving car or a water taxi and relates it to the psychosocial impact of location. Moving closer to my current location, which is London and its infrastructure, I noticed that train platform signs in India are very similar to the London Underground roundels. And scanning forums online, I learned that Kolkata is Asia's London. This is unsurprising, as it was the former headquarters of the British Raj in India and was certainly modeled after London. Both are cities that developed along the river, the Thames, and the Hooghly, respectively. And ironically, its current chief minister declared as recently as 2011 that she wanted to make Kolkata Asia's London. They've even erected a mini Big Ben, which is causing traffic jams in the city. And there was a proposal to erect a London Eye on the Hooghly, etc. And so these images show my process from source imagery through orthographic drawing, then image distortion using a perspective grid, and finally with its profile shape being laser cut in aluminium with a vinyl print on top. And finally, here it is mounted in City and Guilds Art School, where I graduated from. And I think the sort of foyer as a space of arrival and departure sits well with a kind of echo to a train platform. And with this image of a squeegee in the print room, I will say thank you. And please do find me on Instagram.
There we go. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, yes.
It should say, are you exhausted?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay, okay, cool.
Yes and yes.
You are welcome to answer the question. I'm sure you are all exhausted. I've been seeing your night walks. I'm like these tutors are keeping you up very, very late. Or is it the other way around? Are you keeping them up?
Bit of both.
Anyways. Okay, so firstly, thank you to Sarah and Manijeh for the invitation to present and share work with you all. I'm a little overwhelmed by this moment and this invitation, and I hope that whatever I share is of some use or value to the conversations that you're part of in Unit 5 in this process. I also really wish I was in Italy with you all in the summer. Yeah, okay, so I'm going to give a slightly disjointed talk through some ideas around images and show you some work that I've been working on over the past couple of years. Some of it is video and some of it is image based, and then some of it is design work. So I'm going to play this video and I'm going to talk a little bit over it while it's playing. I hope you can keep up with me because there's text and image, so I hope it doesn't overwhelm you too much. Yeah, I'll turn the sound down a bit in a second. Every day, on my regular, usual scroll through the debris of daily digital noise, I am prompted to replace my doom scrolling with something else. A new app, 5 minutes of meditation, a new social media space, a new online community circle that is guaranteed to foster real, meaningful exchange or connection. A space where the images are better curated than the ones I'm currently accessing. A platform for real, meaningful exchange, new sustainable solutions to current and future problems. We're confronted by images that seduce, that scream, that distract, that twist and warp. Images move fast, we know this. They morph into memes, and we consume them through the scroll and the swipe. Adrienne Marie Brown is by far the best meme curator any of us have ever encountered. We all agree this in conversation when we're hanging out IRL, but staring at our phones. In preparing for this talk on the idea of the image heist, I've been confronted with the question of how I think about images and what images mean to me in my work. As a designer, as an artist, my work is predominantly image-based. I'm a visual artist, or so my bio says. In 2009, Hito Stale wrote a seminal text titled In Defense of the Poor Image, in which she argues that the pixelated images and poor copies or the digital waste of the image world are like images that have run through the mill too many times, screenshots that are screenshot over and over, images that are degraded, to have a place in this world. The copy of the copy also has a place. The poor image circulates faster and it democratizes our access to high quality images. The poor image demonstrates the aesthetics of circulation and testifies to a digital visual culture that valorizes velocity, spread, and participation. 12 or so years later, we operate in a much more terrifying realm where we are confronted with a new image hierarchy. High resolution images that force us to question our understanding of origins, authenticity, and originality. To speak of images today feels overwhelming, especially with the advances in AI imaging technology. We can imagine any number of infinite scenarios. We can stage, we can dream, we can convert sketches into real-ish scenarios, but we can also manipulate, twist, and morph images, fill in things that were not there before, which begs a question of responsibility and, more than anything, trust. So I've become interested in this idea of corruptible images or images that corrupt. One of these is the deep fake, of course, but I think also about the role that AI imaging tools play and the ways in which data we input and feed into the system is what builds the system. We provide the reference points for AI to learn and draw from us. It's not uncommon nowadays to read about people encountering images of themselves that they did not consent to or knowingly consent to sharing for use. So in thinking about the image heist, I think about the corruption and co-option of images, and by extension, our constant consumption of images, and therefore the co-option of our imagination. We exist, I think, at least I exist, in a state of image exhaustion. And this is where this video kind of exists, and there are 4 others like it. And it leads me to think about trust, fatigue in a kind of visual world, but trust in the sense that where the photographic image is supposed to provide some kind of sense of evidence or truth, we no longer are able to trust photographic images as providing any form of evidence or truth. They produce new worlds and they challenge what we understand in terms of what we are consuming. So what I'm sharing with you here, or what I shared with you in this video, is, I'm just going to open this one up. The video is part of a series of works called Sorry for the Delayed Response, which is, I think, has 4 videos as part of the series at the moment. And it's a collection of digital noise that explores, amongst many urgent ideas, the debris of a distraction economy, the irony of a wellness industrial complex, and the fatigue of sustainability practices across every aspect of our daily lives, from what we eat to how we shop, sleep, consume, and work. In these videos and in this image here, which is a text-based work, you can see the text, right? Just making sure. Yes. Okay. I play with the language of advertising, often asked through sponsored posts by influencers, which often makes it more ubiquitous and hard to understand whose voice we're really encountering. So I play with this language of advertising and I throw it back in a somewhat kind of witty, irreverent, challenging way to ask, like, what is this language that we are so co-opted into? What are the words that co-opt us? And what are the images that kind of trap us, that pull us in, that seduce us, that twist us and manipulate us? I feel that I am constantly stuck in an image loop. I'm constantly feeding the image machine and consuming from the image machine. I sometimes open Instagram with the hope that I can post something, maybe my work, maybe something from my day. I often just find that I have pictures of cats and screenshots of open calls that I hope to apply for. And most of the time, there's nothing interesting in my phone to actually post. But I do get caught with this idea that I need to feed into the system because everybody else is sharing. And what does it mean if I am not? How do I fall out of touch with what is happening? But also, why do I need to post every single day? Why do I need to share something? I mean, if you do follow me, you probably just see cats all the time because that's all that's ever in there. Anyway, so we live in response to images, images of wellness, images of productivity. And when I say images of things, I mean, it's a performance of, it's a staged version of a thing. So the image of wellness is not what wellness is. The image of productivity is not what productivity is. The image of work, the image of progress, the image of community, and so too images of violence and protest and action. The images we consume are warped, they're distorted, they are manipulated, they are sensationalized, and we exist in the state of image exhaustion. So that's one thought. And while I have a few minutes, I'm gonna switch to something else. Here we go. In 2015, I found this today while looking for some material to share for this talk. In 2015, this was while I was doing my master's, I encountered, there was an April Fool's moment where Google decided to make Pac-Man Street version available on the Google homepage. So they added this game function, and anyone anywhere in the world could open Google Maps and play the game based on a section of your city. Pac-Man could be chased by ghosts in your very hometown, but in most major cities. Unfortunately, not everywhere was able to access it, or some places did not show up on the map. So places that did not have regulated or marked roads, such as, for example, a township in South Africa, Gaza in Palestine, these were not available. And I started to search for a number of places that I thought would be interesting places to play this game of ghosts, chasing Pac-Man down. And a lot of places that I thought would be interesting were not available. And it got me thinking around, what are the limits of this kind of virtual mapping? But also, what does this say about spaces that are inhabited, but not considered inhabited enough to form part of this game? Many years later, the work prompted me to work on a larger project, which was called Johannesburg Lasts, which Sarah was a part of as well, which was one of our earliest collaborations. And Johannesburg Last was a project that looked at, I hope this opens quickly. Johannesburg Last was a project that looked at spectral hauntings and toxic legacies in Johannesburg through the work of 8 artists, architects, designers, writers, who use the virtual platform of an online journal system that we have here in Johannesburg, attached to a university project. We had this online system to play with, to think about how we produce a series of creative, artistic works that could speak about the toxic legacies of a city through the digital form. And so the projects that were produced speak about spectral haunting, they speak about mapping, they speak about navigating physical space in a virtual realm. And a lot of them speak about dust. Well, if you know Johannesburg, it's a mining city. And so dust proliferates in not just the physical realm, but in the virtual world through the works that are here. And many of the works speak about the impacts and the influence of dust on our bodies, on our organs, and what these lifelong kind of toxic legacies are for our bodies. So when you have a moment, you can go through the Johannesburg Last website if you are interested in seeing more of these projects. But this is one of the ways in which I think about, so my work kind of transgresses or moves across different fields, from art, from visual arts to design, architecture, and then thinking with the virtual realm, or thinking about how we can critique forms of digital or AI making in our practices. The last thing that I want to show you, which seems to not show up, give me a second. No, it's disappeared. Okay. Ah, my last window disappeared. There we go. Okay, here we are. So one of the other aspects of my work, I know I've given you a lot of information very quickly, but one of the last things I'll share is some of the design work that I do, which is a way of thinking about graphic design, which is not my which is not my field of study in any way, but it's a way of making that I've come to because I'm interested in the language of design, in how we can use graphic design or illustration in social justice spaces. So I've been working on a series of publications. Sarah mentioned that I worked on the Biennale catalog for this year. But a lot of my design work is rooted in social justice and feminist activist work. These are just, sorry, I'm just like scrolling very fast through events and projects. But what I wanted to get to was something like this. So some of the work that I do is thinking about collaborating with writers, with artists, with academics, and thinking about how design and illustration can play a role in telling stories and in highlighting grassroots activist work that people do. So I work with a series of feminist organizations in South Africa and beyond to think about like how illustration can play a role in highlighting their work. And I want to show you one. So here's one example of a project that speaks about publishing as protest action, as much as protest action on the street is protest action. The Public Action is a project that speaks about, it's a collection of writing, drawings, songs, poems, illustrations that were produced by students during 2 years of Fees Must Fall activist work. And it's a collection from 23 universities in South Africa. And then, oh, come on, my computer is slowing down. Some of my design work looks at working with people producing work on the relation between data and race. So there's a project called Black Beyond Data, which is at Johns Hopkins University in the US. And then I thought I'd speak just very briefly about this, which was a project I did with Greenpeace earlier this year, which was using AI imaging technologies to think about how we can use AI or imaging tools to imagine future sustainable cities that we hope to exist in or operate in. And I'm very curious about how quickly something like AI can be used as a tool for positive kind of imagination. But I wonder where the responsibility lies in thinking about where we go with these tools, what we can imagine with them, and what information gets fed into these systems. So this was something for Greenpeace to think about these ideas of responsibility and what does it mean to dream with technology to imagine a future space or a future city. yeah, I think I'll stop there. I have like way too much to show you, but I think that's my 15 minutes. So maybe we open up for conversation.
Yeah, I mean, like two such interesting presentations and with lots of like connections between your work, but also to a lot of the stuff we've been talking about. Does anyone have any initial questions or observations? I have one. Hi, nice to meet you. Yeah, I'm an architect and I love to explore other fields of creativity. I have a ton of a question, but do you feel that when something is created or curated in a design field gets more powers? I mean, the message has more powers, or the level of can escalate it in other, I don't know if you understand, but like the message you have, if it's well created and has curated and you have design on it, can, you know, like from, I don't know how to say it, but it gets the message to more people, or only the ones who can, or we study design are the people who get that message? I don't know if the person is clear. Did you hear the question?
I think I got it. I'm not sure. Is the question for me or Vasu? Or is it open?
To either of you.
So it's a question about access, is it? Like,
Yeah.
or dissemination and how many people actually,
And
or who is it for, maybe?
And I think influence, because I think the work obviously sits within an art realm. So I think Kathy is asking around the power that has to I think add to like change or transformation around particular conversations. I don't know if I've I don't know. I didn't say this was you.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I feel like a lot of what I do, they're more like gestures, and in a way they start out as being for myself, and then when they're shared in an exhibition space, yes, it opens up conversations. But yeah, I don't think sort of I've seen them as like a mass gesture, or like a poster, or like really being in the public space yet. And that's something I'm curious to explore. But yeah, if the right opportunity presents itself.
Yeah, I think I would add to that. So I agree, like often, so for example, like when I produce a video piece like the one I played, for me, that's a way of processing a lot of noise in my head as a first. At the outset, it's a way to process and get stuff out of my head to make space for something else. So I use video as a tool to process ideas first. But to answer your question more directly, I think, you know, when you have a curated body of work that you can put together in some kind of public platform, for sure, it definitely helps to make the kind of conversation more clear and more prominent, and get more input and get more voices involved in it. But that doesn't necessarily always have to happen through established spaces. Like, it's something that you can produce much more independently. And, you know, as much as I like complain about social media, it is a platform in which you can actually set up a space to curate that conversation and to get people interested in a series of ideas that you are interested in talking about. So I would definitely use that as an initial free space to actually, like, you know, set up the stage for a curated series of works, ideas, drawings, conversations. Absolutely. Yeah, I don't know if that helps, if that answers your question in some way.
What I was thinking is that as a designers, we just sometimes get used to the cool and the aesthetic ways of seeing things, and obviously for most of the people who don't have like these backgrounds of design, it's like the same thing, you know? Like they can have like a sign or like a Instagram post saying the same topic, but I don't know if it's not easy for us to digest, you know, like the information because it's well curated, because it's hand designed. And for a lot of people, it's more like, yeah, can get to the paper to say everything, you know. So yeah, so more about that way of how you feel about sometimes your work gets more power or less power because it's curated by design and, you know, all this stuff.
Yeah, okay, I see where the kind of like the kick is. So look, I think in a world that is obsessed with aesthetics, and particular like trends in aesthetics, because it is what we are all obsessed with on a level of most forms of making and producing work. You know, I think when you have something that is like, and I'm going to speak from a graphic design perspective, when you have or produce material that fits with a particular new trend in making or visualization, it gets picked up because it's fitting into a kind of current stream. And there are these trends, right? So there's like these new wave, or kind of there's always a trend in graphic design. Now you're using serifed fonts and they're really big. Now you're using Helvetica again, and you know, we're going old school. Like there's always this kind of like, you don't necessarily, I don't think, need to follow those things or have design that is super polished in order to share the work and the ideas that you want to share. It doesn't have to be perfectly polished, but it depends what kind of realm you want to exist in, or in what realm you want your kind of project or research area to take up a kind of space. And then I would say, look at what is happening in that kind of little space that you're interested in inserting yourself into, and say, okay, well, how do I kind of like lean into that, still have my own visual voice, but kind of, you know, kind of get people interested. The other way is to like collaborate with someone who maybe likes doing design work and kind of bring them in to like think about the aesthetics of the production of the work as much as you are thinking about the actual work. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry.
That's Nana. Hi, I'm Nana.
Hi.
I just wanted to ask you, both of you as an architect, what do you find these days like most powerful medium for modern art? What's the most powerful to present works that arise attention and the voice?
That's it.
I mean,
You want to go?
yeah, I feel like, you know, I'm ideas led, so I wouldn't sort of choose one medium or the other. And I think there is a kind of return to, I mean, yes, we live in this digital and ephemeral world, and but I feel like there is a return to materiality and sort of the physicality of things, and yeah, what that can evoke. And maybe that's a bit old school of me, and I think for me, like I've spent the last few years really invested in working with my hands, which I think, you know, I missed. but yeah, I can't sort of say one medium over the other. It's always kind of been driven by the project, those decisions.
Yeah, I think my answer would be similar. I like, and I tend to gear my work towards projects that are publishing based or that involve making books, because I really like making books. So I try to gear my work towards the production of some kind of small publication or zine. I find zines, small zines, like an interesting way to tell stories or to share small projects. So, but that's, that's my personal interest. I tend to get both terrified by and exhausted by like keeping up with any kind of trend in making, because those are kind of, they're fleeting. So find the medium. I would say find a medium that you enjoy the most, and that's the one that's the one that you should go with. Like for me, making books gives me great joy.
I have just a thought when you were speaking about the images and how it's getting more and more of certain higher quality of vibrance, and how this is changing by trend. I remember that there was an artist made a project where he kept uploading the same image on Instagram like infinitely, and at some point the image is not there anymore because of generation loss. Each time you apply an image, it loses its quality. If you do this on infinity, the image will disappear. And this kind of repetition of the same copy that you do is there all the time. So we always need to change the way we do it or change the image. It doesn't have to stay with the quality of the work. So we should have the same idea that in order to keep the image there, out there, you will always need to change its shape, its styling, its font, its size, everything else. So this is something that is in our respect of the world.
Sorry, I don't think I fully got all of I don't think I've probably heard all of what you were saying. I don't know if I've missed a question in what you're saying.
No.
Okay. No, but like I think this idea of the degradation of the image exists, and then the image re-exists over and over and over and over in a new realm on some other random 100 or I don't know 500,000 people's photo albums, screenshot after screenshot. Yeah, I don't know, like that degradation of the image is something I'm curious about. I think I know the example that you were sharing of the screenshot that's reshared over and over and over, and then you have this new kind of image, this new kind of aesthetic, this new kind of energy that's produced, which is so far removed from anything that was its so-called original form. And I think the deep fake is a terrifying one in that regard, because you don't know where to draw. I mean, I think with many deep fakes you can see if you look long enough, but often that the erosion of trust in an image as any kind of evidence, I think the deep fake really pushes our sense of trust, or challenges the sense of trust.
Maybe to build on that, I guess, Vasu, you talked about kind of reverse engineering, like existing tropes, and then Naadira, you talked about corruptible images, or like this. I think those are kind of similar to what we're trying to do in the unit with the Heist, like trying to think of ways that we change a narrative or insert ourselves into these established narratives. So yeah, I was just wondering how both of you kind of began to see that as a thread running through your practice.
I think that the sort of biggest sort of transitory moment was realizing that I didn't need to be a graphic designer to do what I was doing, and or that I didn't need to be a fabricator or a painter, or there are, and I think that maybe comes from architectural training, where we've produced books, we make videos, we're just kind of, we never really stop and say, actually, you know what, that's not my remit. That's a whole other skill set. But just also being open to collaborators and yeah, taking up that sense of agency in and accepting that my sort of design skills are fairly limited. Like when I tried to like font search like what these traffic infrastructure signs use, I couldn't afford the exact typeface, because obviously you need to pay lots of money for those kinds of things. And I would just go for like the nearest match, and it's an approximation, and just kind of being very lighthearted about it, and not sort of being thrown by wanting to do things ultra professionally. And I think that kind of just like knowing my limitations, but like sort of seeing past it to sort of get the idea across in however small way it was. Like, they are fairly, they're A5 prints really. So, but I think just sort of going ahead and sort of soldiering through that doubt and like sort of lack of knowledge, I think has been key to making work.
Manijeh, do you mind to repeat the question for me?
So I was saying that like a parallel I found in both your practices and also what we're doing in the unit is this idea of like what Vasu called like reverse engineering trope, but what you were talking about practical image making or images, or thinking of how we like corrupt established narratives through the work we produce. And I was wondering if you could talk about how that became a thread through your practice.
Okay. Well, I think maybe what I would speak about is like the work that I do with feminist activist organizations in thinking about graphic design or the role of illustration there. And in the past 3 years, I've like the work I do with feminist organizations has grown like exponentially and really fast. And it's because of, I think, what I introduce as an artist coming into a design realm as a kind of language that is slightly softer, but also more artistic, as a response to thinking about how to showcase an activist organization's work, which sits outside of traditional graphic design rules most of the time, because I don't know those rules and I don't follow them. And most of the designers that NGOs and activist organizations work with often come from corporate graphic design training. And so there's a particular sensibility to the work that they often feel sits out of step with what it is they're actually trying to communicate. And so what I've noticed is a massive growth from the organizations that I work with and others affiliated with them, because they're all connected in some way, is the use of illustration as an antidote to very boring graphic design, to make reports and tell stories. And so using illustration as a tool to share the narratives of the people who are involved in actual grassroots activist work, rather than putting words on a page in an A4 report that's shared as a PDF that nobody ever opens. And that's something that's been interesting. So how does illustration in that design realm, or thinking about its function as an antidote to very masculine, very patriarchal worlds? And there's a lot of patriarchy in feminist organizations that still governs and causes problems. That's something you don't get away from. But I've been interested and curious about how they've chosen to use illustration to tell stories much more to soften ways of working, to soften the stories and to soften narrative. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but it's definitely something that I'm enjoying playing with in the work that I do.
No, that's really fascinating. Yeah, I think for me, like the power of the work, the image that you speak about, is like making images a device that gathers more people, or it's more accessible, or a device that advocates is really interesting. So the image becomes, it has its own agency in a way. It's really fascinating. And I think a lot of the participants are kind of working with that in different ways. So it feels very relevant, and it's kind of a really good time to talk about that. But also, yeah, I think as Naadira was saying, to understand, to kind of make sense of this world of images and like visual setting, but also habits at the same time. So you're using the same tools, but against themselves is really interesting, and kind of occupying the gaps or slippages in changing the funds or the resolution of something, or the chaos or speed of something, is also, yeah, these are all invitations for design, which is both criticizing and making sense of, but also producing something new, which I think everyone there is designing. Also kind of working, yeah, it's really inspiring. Thank you.
Do you have any questions for each other?
I was looking at my notes. No, I'm just amazed by how many worlds you sit in, Naadira. I think that's incredible. Just like how you, yeah, like you said, transgress disciplines and just the sheer output is amazing. So yeah, I'm very inspired and happy to have met you here today.
Thank you. I mean, so it's why I asked the question, are you exhausted? I think it's because I am like constantly. No, but to be serious. No, I'm also, look, I'm fascinated also by the language of the sign and the road sign, and how the road sign or the welcome to sign kind of tells a story about a border, and it tells a story about specific locality. And I really love the way that you are kind of bridging one or two or three spaces as reference points in one sign. And it's about locality, it's about geography, it's about a colonial project, it's about influence, it's about modernism. And then there's the language of graphic design, which inevitably is very much part of the making of state road signage. You know, like it becomes the identity for a particular place of a particular time. So there's a lot of worlds that are existing in one sign for one city. And I'm really fascinated by your exploration of that actually in detail. I also really appreciate that you have a very specific focus area and that's, it's loaded and it's diverse, but it's very, very focused in thinking about languages, visual languages in that signage. I think it's really powerful work. So thank you to you for sharing, and thank you, Sarah and Manijeh, for like opening this space and this conversation, and to the students, of course, for your questions.
Yeah, we actually perfectly on time.
Well, perfectly. Do you have any other questions for us, or I don't know?
Well, I'd like to know what sort of image projects some of the students are working on.
You should probably follow our Instagram. There is the Instagram for our unit, so you can see what we're doing. Also,
It's run by our participants, so I don't know, they're taking it where it wants to go.
It's become the talk of the Biennale College. For Heist organizers.
Oh, is that the Instagram page? Heist
Yeah.
Archive.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
You'll be
You're
honest.
just eating gelato all the time.
It's important to be fast for the night walks. What to add to it. Apparently gelato feels perfect. Can you? I found that out today on my walk. But no, I think it's been really interesting to think about the way information travels. Like we've been talking a lot about it in the unit, but I think a lot of both of your presentations today provided us with other perspectives also on that same topic. Like I think last time when you were talking about the ways in which, you know, places like used to reference each other, that was something that Sarah and I talked a lot about in our unit presentation. With that from our first exercise, where all the participants were writing postcards to Venice from a place they had lived or a place they come from, to kind of personify that relationship to place in a way. It was really fascinating and really insightful, and also to talk about the kind of power structures that we operate within. And then I think, Naadira, when you were also talking about like the way the internet is used to like kind of give us like almost overwhelm us with imagery. I think all those questions, it was so funny, like each of them a color therapy session. I was just like answering all the questions as they popped up on the screen in my head. And thinking about how the internet's changed the way information travels, for good or bad, you know, but it's, yeah, it's like, I don't know, I think it's like these questions of like they continue to grow in meaning. And the number of ways you can answer them. So yeah, we started with the but yeah, I think also like despite the title of what we're trying to is also like not just talk about images, but go beyond images. So there's been a lot of like writing, performance, reenactment. We did like a crazy like 2.5 hour walk, 3 hour walk the other day, where everyone was like taking us to places they discovered to show us seen and unseen things in Venice, and almost like to show us what the image can't capture, which I think what you also spoke about in the work. So yeah, watch this space.
Sounds exciting.
Yeah, we'll try and capture as much as we can on the Instagram. It's not really enough.
Cool.
It's one room.
I think one of the things that really fascinates me about Venice is the image of like the island, the old city where you all are, and then the real world, the industrial world that exists on the mainland. So Venice is this kind of, it's an image, it's a kind of, it's not a real, it almost, every time I have got on the boat from the mainland to the island, I think about how it's the city of imagination and fantasy, but the real world exists on the mainland. So you leave reality in some way to go and visit Venice, where you know, are transported into this like magical other time that sits out of step with modern technology. So watching like Amazon boxes come on boats and, you know, delivered, the delivery system sits out of step and out of time with a modern or a contemporary world. And that really fascinates me about how it insists on sitting out of time, continuously sitting out of time with what is going on in the rest of the world. And I find that image fascinating, the island, its fantasy playground, and then the industrial, you get the skyline, you see the cranes and you see industry and you see the factories. And it's these two very separate worlds that exist alongside each other, separated by water. Anyways, that's my two cents for thinking about images in Venice.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah,
Cool.
I think yeah, thank you so much for joining us from where you are. And we hope to, I guess, stay in dialogue in some way
Some of the participants might reach out to you about particular projects if it becomes relevant. Yeah, but I think this is a great starting point as they kind of move into developing their projects around Venice. And I think, I don't know, just kind of keying in certain conversations which are really, really relevant. So thanks for your time and your generosity.
And for also agreeing for this last minute reschedule.
Yes.
Doing it later, we really appreciate it. And yeah, we found it really inspiring. So we'll keep you posted about how things develop.
So thanks everyone, and have a good evening. And
you.
Yeah.
and a walk maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. Enjoy your next walk.
Enjoy.
Thanks for having us.
Bye.
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 Nice to meet you all. Bye.
Thank you.